This episode is brought to you by Roundtable Group, the experts on experts. We've been connecting attorneys with experts for over 30 years. Find out more at roundtablegroup.com.
Welcome to Engaging Experts. I'm your host, Noah Ballmer, and today I'm excited to welcome Randy Wall to the show. Mr. Wall is the principal at Snow Sports Expert and Consulting, where he provides expert and forensic services for cases involving skiing, sledding, tubing, and other snow sports. Mr. Wall holds a Master of Public Administration from Montana State. Mr. Wall, thank you so much for joining me here today on Engaging Experts.
Well, thanks for having me.
Of course, let's jump into it. So your career has spanned civil engineering to snow sports. How did you first become involved in expert witnessing?
Well, let me just correct you right out of the gate, Noah, because I've actually been a certified ski instructor longer than I've been a licensed civil engineer.
Wow.
I got my first alpine certification from the Professional Ski Instructors of America, or PSIA, in Mammoth Mountain, California in 1982. And then I think I got my first civil engineering license in 1987. Yeah, so I've been around for a while.
So how did you first become involved in expert witnessing?
I was born and raised in California, and my wife and I, who's also a civil engineer, we've been entrepreneurs our entire lives, and we had an engineering firm in Northern California in a town called Auburn, California, that we owned there for 15 years. And I was pretty well known in the community, and attorneys in the community sought me out to do expert witness work in the civil engineering field. It wasn't a career pursuit. It was just something that I did because they contacted me and wanted me to do it. So that's really how I got started.
Were you aware of expert witnessing at all at that point? Is it something that you were looking for, or did it just kind of fall on your lap?
I like the work because I've got pretty good communication skills, which is kind of atypical for engineers. And yeah, I like the work. I like the research. I've always been intrigued by the legal field.
When you get a phone call for a potential engagement, how do you decide whether or not you're going to accept it? What are some of the main things that you look for to vet a potential engagement?
Well, one thing I learned through my engineering career and basically being all things, all sales, all entrepreneurial, is to get people talking and listen to them. Attorneys are pretty cool like that because they like to talk. And so I get them to tell me through follow-up questions and just conversationally, just everything they know about the case right off the bat. A lot of times what a attorney will do is send me the complaint first in an inquiry over the internet, and then we'll schedule a call. Yeah, sometimes it's just not a good fit because my expertise is very specialized.
What are, some of the kind of tangential engagements that you have to think about for a minute, whether or not you're the right person? And how do you go about saying no?
I just had an inquiry from an attorney, and they had absolutely no evidence. There was collision on the hill, and the plaintiff got hit by a snowboarder, and it broke his ribs and it broke his arm, but he skied down to the clinic. Typically in a ski accident, what will happen is that there'll be a collision, somebody goes down, they call the ski patrol shows up towing a toboggan, they assess the situation, they'll do what's called an incident report, and they'll put the person in the toboggan. The ski areas that really have got it together, somebody from the ski area will show up on the site, typically like a mountain manager or assistant mountain manager, and they'll take pictures of the event, the area, the event, and make their own sketch. But in this particular case, there was no documentation. The ski boarder went off. The guy skied down to the clinic, and the only piece of paper that they had for the entire case was this medical intake form at the clinic.
So there just wasn't
So
enough.
yeah, it really came down to he said, she said.
Mm,
They wanted to hire me to do accident reconstruction, to go to the site and look at it. There wasn't any evidence. There were no eyewitness reports, nothing. That was not a good fit.
do you do a lot of site visits and reconstructions, things like that use demonstratives?
Sometimes. Most of the time what happens is the event will have occurred a couple of years ago. And by the time the attorneys file the complaint and the case starts going forward, it's 2 or 3 years old. Sometimes I do. I have done that in the past. I've looked at the situation, gone out and looked at a ski area, but it's a little abstract because of the temporal aspect of it. It's separated by a few years.
Right. How do you convey things like that to a judge in a bench trial or a jury? How do you convey things, that have a lot of complex moving parts, people running into things and, the timeline that occurred for an accident? How do you, to lay people, communicate that in a way that they understand?
One skill I honed as an engineer, and this has to do with initial conversations, initial sales, conversions, projects like in an engineering venue. Some projects last for years, 3 or 4 years. Is the one skill I honed was to how to take really complex concepts and be able to explain them in simple, easy to understand language. And this is really key if I'm on the stand and I'm talking to a jury.
Tell me about your preparation methods. So you have a deposition tomorrow, or you have a jury trial, or whatever the case may be. Something big's going to happen. What are the sorts of things that you like to do to get yourself, A, prepared with the material, but B, in the right headspace? I've had experts tell me they like to meditate, or they like to, listen to loud music, or fast, or eat, or drink coffee. Tell me a little bit about your getting ready for the big day routine, if you have one.
I think some of my colleagues and my friends think I'm very strange because I am intrigued by the challenge of depositions and essentially going toe to toe with attorneys.
Hmm.
So the number one rule of an expert witness is to stay in your lane. This starts right off the bat with a case when I write my expert report, because that's my roadmap. That's my lane that I stay in from start to finish. One of the things that really honed my skills as a communicator, as a researcher, as a writer, was I had a technical degree, civil engineering technical degree, which is great, which, by the way, sets me apart from all the other consultants in my field, which there aren't that many. And then later on in my career at age 51, I went back to school and I got my master's in public administration, which is a social science degree, essentially. Okay. And it was 2 years of graduate level research and writing and communication. What I didn't realize at the time was that master's stacked on top of my engineering degree gave me an extraordinary skill set for expert witness work. So my research, my writing, all feeds into my expert report. And then at depositions, my lane is my report.
Absolutely. So tell me a little bit about your report writing strategy. Do you like to organize everything with indices, or do you use visuals in them? How do you like to go about writing an expert report? Are you ever given a bare bones or any kind of an outline from your engaging attorney?
No, I wouldn't even take it, because I have a template that I use. All of my reports look exactly the same, and they contain different information based upon the forensic evidence that's available to the case.
Naturally.
So if there's pictures are great. I'm pretty good at drawing diagrams. Back in the day, when I was coming up through engineering school, it was pencil on vellum, ink on mylar, and it was all handwork. I came up, that's called coming up on the boards. I came up on the boards. So my penmanship is really good, people tell me. I'm very good at communicating through diagrams. A lot of times I'll hand draw diagrams and put them in my report. And I also have another skill that I don't know if this is intrinsic to me. I know a lot of people don't have this skill, but I have extraordinary visualization skills. For example, house plans are two-dimensional, right? Okay, well, I can look at a house plan and I could pull it right up off out of the paper in 3 dimensions, spin it around, cut sections through it. And I just thought, hey, can't everybody do that? It's like, no. And it really helps out, especially combined with my hundreds of ski lessons that I've done, thousands of hours I've spent on the ski hills. That really helps out in regard to the physics, the mechanics, and the visualization of how things happen on the ski hill.
So those images in your expert reports are invaluable, and you tend to draw your own. Do you ever have to contract out any demonstratives, or do you take care of all of those diagrams and photographs yourself?
Actually, there's a colleague of mine here in town who is a forensics crash reconstruction expert.
Wow.
And there is this amazing software out that they're using now, where he was showing me a picture of this video of this Dodge truck pulling a trailer, like a 25-foot Airstream that went off a dam. And he reconstructed, they take all the aerial photographs and they have all the images of the cars. It's all in the software. And he had this movie of this car just going off this bridge, off this dam up in the mountains. Now, so I went to him and I said, hey, can you make me some like crash test dummies with skis on? And can we do this together? He said, yeah. When I want to do accident reconstruction, if there's enough information to do an accident reconstruction of a collision, I can do that and put it up on the screen, and it's so impressive.
That's amazing.
So, yeah.
And I'm sure that really lands with judges and juries. So you've mentioned a few times at how small your field is in terms of having experts. With that, do you find yourself on the other side of a case against the same experts time after time? Do you develop relationships, or at least acquaintanceships with the other experts in your field? What's that dynamic like?
Honestly, I dedicated myself to working in the snow sports fields. It just happened organically. About 3 years ago, I realized that the combination of my engineering and my ski experience just merged. And it was actually at an expert witness conference where I was talking to this guy by the name of James Magravetti. He's the education director for SEEK. And he really helped me get clear on my direction.
Yeah, it definitely can help to have somebody, not just show you the ropes, but kind of guide you a little bit. Let's talk a little bit about contracts. So when you have a new engagement, do you have any special terms that you like to put in the contract? Some people have, do project rates. Some people do hourly rates. Some people take a retainer. Tell me a little bit about how you structure your contracts.
So one of the things that I've done in my career is I am an educator in the engineering industry. Civil engineers, like attorneys and doctors, in order to maintain their licenses, they have to do continuing education units. Typically for an engineer, it's 30 contact hours, or what they call PDH, professional development hours, every 2 years. I do that. I think it's important for me to give back to the industry. And one of the things, the reason why I bring this up is because one of the things I teach to engineers is professional services contracts. Years ago, the state where I got my, what they call base license was California. Now, the base license is the first engineering license I got. And by the way, if there's any engineers out there listening, do not ever let your base license expire. Years ago, when I was practicing in California, California passed a law. And they said that all engineers have to have a written contract for everything they do. And that was fine because I did anyway. From a one-page to a full-on master agreement, I wrote all my own contracts, had them vetted by attorneys. So when I got into the expert witness business, it turns out that Seek has a time-tested agreement, canned agreement that you can buy, which I did. And I bought it, and then I went through it, and I tweaked it, and I made it my own. And it's 10 pages long, and it covers everything. And so I've heard different schools of thought, like, just like have a one-page agreement. It's like, no, I want everything in writing. I do all my work by the hour on retainer because that's my experience based upon results. That's the most surefire way for me to get paid.
Have you ever had any difficulty with either getting paid or with having an attorney agree to sign your contracts?
Yes.
Tell me a little bit about that. You don't have to name any names, but tell me a little bit, in general, how that went.
When I was first starting out in engineering, I had a mentor friend of mine who said, he sat me down one day. He's like, let me tell you the 3 phases of this work, of consulting work. I'm like, okay. He said, first of all, you can't even believe that people are paying you for what you love to do. Greg, yeah. He said, second of all, you start to realize that you got to get that you're going to have expenses and you need to make money. You need to get the money in the door. So, okay, what's the third phase? He says, well, the third phase that you get to is just to heck with it. Just give me the money. All right. Now, that's a little bit unjust, but there's a lot of truth in that. Because right now, every once in a while, an attorney will get out ahead of me in regard to, some deadline or whatever. And I know better. And then I have to chase them down. It's just the nature of the beast, I guess.
Right.
Yeah. And through my engineering career, I got really good at chasing people down for money because I'm really good at what I do and I'm worth it.
Absolutely. Speaking of, getting a good engagement, how do you get off on the right foot with a new attorney? How do you proceed at the beginning of an engagement to make sure that momentum carries you throughout the entire engagement? It's a good working relationship between you and the engaging attorney.
Okay, well, there's this word, and the word is hubris. For those listeners who don't know what hubris means, it's having all the answers, but it's more than that. It's more like having all the answers and sucking all the oxygen out of the room at the same time. Those types of attorneys are not a good fit for me. I know how to ask the right questions to figure that out. Mm-hmm. Now, for example, I had an attorney call me up. So I listened to him, and I was prodding him along the way, asking follow-up questions. I wanted to see where he was coming from. So he said, what do you think? And I said, well, that's not it. And he said, what do you mean that's not it? I said, it's not it. He goes, okay, tell me what it is. The really intriguing part about working in the snow sports industries, there's very little standing law that regulates snow sports. Very, very little. Some states have what they call ski responsibility laws. Some state, like California the state doesn't have one, but counties within the state that have ski areas in them have them, but they're all kind of squishy in regard to language and they're not consistent. Okay. So you got that. Then you have other organizations. There's 2 national standards organizations, ASTM, American Standards for Testing and Methods. And then you have ANSI, American National Standards Institute. ASTM has standards for snow and water sports. mostly equipment oriented. ANSI has a code called B77, which is for tows and ropeways. In other words, chairlifts or rope tows or all that, right? So that's a different part. By the way, I was on the ANSI B77 committee, but that's more for mechanical engineers. I am a sitting member on the ASTM F27 committee for snow and water sports. But these codes and standards are voluntary. Compliance is voluntary. Then you have National Ski Areas Association, which all the ski areas in America belong to. There's just over 300 ski areas in the United States that belong to National Ski Areas Association. And they issue this thing called Your Responsibility Code. And it's 10 guidelines like ski control, don't ski when you're drunk, the obvious stuff, right? Like look uphill before you start, right? You need to be able to control your speed and avoid objects. Don't ski in closed areas, that kind of stuff. That too is voluntary. Then you have the duty of care, which establishes the responsibilities for the parties that are typically involved in a ski case or a snow sports case, such as the ski area, the skier, the skier's the plaintiff, something happens, they see the ski area. Okay, the standard of care establishes the responsibilities of each of the parties. Every single situation is extraordinarily unique, both from what applies, what doesn't, did they comply with this? Oh, wait a minute, it's voluntary. There is so much to this. Let's bring this back around to that case that I was talking about. What I told him was I said, look, fencing, flagging, signage, all that other stuff, that's all applies sometimes. This is about standard of care, breach, cause, and my favorite, which is proximate cause or foreseeable cause, because typically what these things come down to is a series of decisions made by either the plaintiff or the defendant that creates a situation that somebody just happens to walk into. It happens over time. That's a fascinating part of this forensic work that I do, is to go and unpack that. So that's what I told him. I said, look, we need to establish the standard of care. What was the breach? Who breached it? What was the cause and fact? What was the foreseeable cause? And who was negligent? So you know what he did?
What did he do?
He hired me. Not only that, but, and this is the best attorneys that I work with, he did not tell me anything about how he wanted me to write my report. So those are the best attorneys to work with, because they don't have some preconceived conclusion in their head.
Absolutely. Before we wrap up, do you have any last advice for expert witnesses or for attorneys working with experts?
So much of this work is, for an expert, what we don't know, we don't know. To me, that's right in my sweet spot. But it does take a lot of courage, because the lessons to learn can be tough at times. And just for one example, in a deposition, never, ever offer anything outside of just answering the question on the table. I had the opposing attorney, they issued this opinion, a rebuttal to something that I had done, and it completely supported our position. I mean, it was like a gift. And I'm like, oh man, I got this thing in my pocket. And in the deposition, they kind of grazed it. I'm like, all right, here's my opportunity. And nope. I brought this up, and the attorney's like, oh, well, tell me more about that, And overall, it bolstered the conclusion, but it opened the door for them for a classic deposition tactic, was to just, they went off on it for like 2 hours. That didn't even need to be there. And, they were just trying to wear me down and get me to make a mistake, which didn't happen. But at the end, the attorney I'm working with, he goes, you did a really good job, but says never, ever offer anything that's,
Absolutely sage advice. Mr. Wall, thank you so much for joining me here today.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
And as always, thank you to our listeners for joining us for another edition of Engaging Experts. Cheers.
Thank you for listening to our podcast, Engaging Experts. Our show notes are available on our website, roundtablegroup.com.